Okay, well, I have the last slot of the afternoon in what has been a very long but very interesting day, and I will be quite brief, not too technical, and I've used quite a lot of pictures, so but I hope you find it informative.
Even humble towers ought to be able to understand.
Yeah. Just so that I can justify my beer later, a little bit of commercial. My name is Nigel Payne. I'm the Managing Director of Forestal Mimosa Limited. We're a company that was established in 1926 here in the UK, so we've been around just over 80 years. And in fact, we can trace our roots back to 1906 and the Forestal Land Timber and Railway Company, which are in fact the people who started the cabacho industry in Argentina. We are part of a wider group representing and ultimately owned by the producers and growers in Africa. Forestal is responsible for the marketing and commercial work of for the East African producers, and those are the producers in Kenya and Zimbabwe. We did used to look after Tanzania, but they have gone their own way. We cover certain markets exclusively. Our primary market is India, together with the likes of Pakistan, Iran, Ethiopia, Egypt, parts of Europe, Eastern Europe, and obviously the UK. We share China with our colleagues and principals in South Africa. It's such a big and varied market that we both look after it. And then the remainder of the markets are looked after directly by South Africa. Just to give you some idea, Mimosa Africa Limited is our technical support company. It's basically the vehicle under which we exhibit at the various leather fairs around the world, and our technical documents are all done under the banner of Mimosa Africa. It's something we have brought to the fore in the last couple of years. Previously, this company was called, I think it was Wattle Export Development, which to me was completely meaningless. Then followed by a name called the African Territories Wattle Industry Fund Limited, quite a mouthful. We are quite proud of or not quite very proud of our African heritage, and hence the Mimosa Africa company is now a legal entity, and it's the banner under which we collectively get together. Just to give you some idea of where we fit in within the vegetable extracts in the world, and you'll note that this does include Tanzania. So we represent 52% of the global mimosa market share. There are only 2 continents that produce mimosa extract in any commercial form, that is Africa and Brazil in South America. And in terms of the global vegetable extract market, we currently have about 27% of the share. And here I'm talking about mimosa extract, cabacho, chestnut, Italian French chestnut, but not Tara, and some of the smaller commercial and not so large vegetable extracts. This slide will just give you an indication of how the production or manufacture of vegetable extracts has declined over the years. And there are many causes of this. The main reason having been the swing to chrome tanning agents, as we've heard earlier this morning, and the development of many types of syntans and retanning materials which are used in leather manufacture. Allied to this has been a decline in the production of heavy leathers, and here you need to read veg tan. And basically things like sole leather have largely been replaced by synthetics, especially in men's casual shoes and almost completely in ladies' and children's shoes. You don't generally see leather sole shoes, ladies' shoes or children's shoes anymore. If you look at a market like India, if you think going back 10, 15, 20 years, virtually every person in India, certainly every adult in India, had a pair of sandals, and most of those sandals would have had leather soles on them. Today, you hardly see any leather soles on sandals in India. The good news is that in recent times we have seen a move from this downward trend. This has been driven, we believe, by fashion in growing markets and emerging markets like India and China, who are demanding more leather goods. They're not accepting synthetics as they have in the past. Again, we've heard about the qualities of leather, the perceptions of quality, longevity in the product, etc., etc. We also have, and again there was some discussion earlier today about the concept of environmentally friendly. There is a perception that vegetable tans are a greener alternative, and to some extent there is some truth in that. And this is basically because of its renewable and natural, being a renewable and natural product. Right, just a little bit about the tree from which we get the extract. This is a bit of a botany class for you. I won't go through it, but basically that'll give you the idea. We're looking here at the genus Acacia. The species grown commercially in Africa is the species Acacia merenzii, and it's more commonly known as the black wattle. There are other species referred to as black wattle, but in fact the true black wattle is the species we grow commercially in Africa, which is Acacia merenzii. It's a species that is indigenous to Australia, but you can see from this distribution here that it actually grows now worldwide. It's been introduced in basically in the temperate zones. It doesn't particularly like cold, as you can see. You don't see any distribution in the polar regions or up in the cold European, South American, Canadian, Alaska areas. There are 955 species in Australia, so that the highest density or concentration of species is in its natural habitat, but it has expanded over the years. This is just a quick slide to give you some idea of its distribution in its natural habitat. Right, the good thing for us as commercial growers in Africa is that that's what it looks like in its natural habitat. Not very good, very difficult to get the bark off, which is where we extract the tannins from. I think the hills in the background are a mixture of wattle and probably eucalyptus, which is also indigenous to Australia. That's just a slide of what many people's perceptions are when you talk about the wattle tree or acacia, or in fact mimosa. They recognize, the flower. This is the black wattle flower. It's not particularly pretty in terms of the acacias. There are many species that are much prettier than that, with a much more brilliant yellow color. We have to live with the dull yellow of this species. And that's a shot of this is called silver wattle, Acacia dealbata, much prettier. As I say, that's what many people relate with the acacia, the wattle, or the mimosa, if you talk about it. Right, a little bit of folklore. And again, just to try and clear up a little bit of misconception or confusion about mimosa versus wattle versus acacia. Generally, the African and the American species are known as acacias. They refer to it in Australia. They don't. In America and Africa, they talk about acacia or acacia, whereas the Australian species are generally referred to as wattle. And the old Anglo-Saxon word wattle comes from the quick and handy house construction method used by the early English settlers in Australia. This is a picture of a house being built of wattle saplings with mud and dung. And basically the branches and saplings were cut and woven into wooden frames, you can see there, to create panels. And these panels were known as wattles, and that's where the name wattle came from. As I said, then mud and dung was packed onto the walls, and then that could be built in virtually a day. They would then burn a fire in the inside overnight, and bingo, you had a house. Why did they do it? Well, because there were ample acacia trees around, gave them lots of raw material, and it's an easy material to work with. It's very springy. It's quite easy to work with. And it's actually said that the city of Sydney started with a wattle branch. I'm not sure the Australians would agree to that. If we look at the name acacia, it is also not absolutely free from doubt, but it's ultimately derived from the Greek word agi. I'm told that's how you pronounce it by my Greek accounts manager, which means a point, and it actually refers to the thorn of the more commonly known acacia species that you see in North Africa and the Middle East. And there's a picture there of a thorny acacia. This is the acacia karoo, found extensively in South Africa. Right, a little bit more confusion, because in Europe, people tend to talk about mimosa. And even in our company name and in the name Mimosa Africa, we also tend to use it, but we use it wrongly, because mimosa, although it's of the same family, it's of a different species. But it's quite easy to see why it's been mixed up, because the flower, although a different color, and you do get the light yellow or dull yellow flowers in some of the mimosa species with the acacia, and often the two are mixed up. They are in fact a different species, although under the same family. Right, now just to talk a little bit about the industry in Africa. Notice our African heritage there, lots of nice pretty pictures of animals. But these are the countries basically that fall under the banner of Mimosa Africa, although we do, Tanzania does group with us in a lot of what we do. Just a little bit of history about the industries in Africa. The black wattle tree was introduced into South Africa in the 1800s with recorded plantings in the Natal area, which is down here, in 1864. And it's also on record that raw bark was supplied to tanneries in the Pietermaritzburg area, which again is down there, as far back as 1884. So the species has been around for quite a long time. And this I'm talking about on a commercial basis. It first came into the Cape, as I said, in the early 1800s. The trees were originally planted as shelter breaks for livestock and for use as fencing, fuel wood, and mine props and the like. But it was on the discovery that the black wattle tree had extraordinary high levels of tannins that the industry has developed into what it is today. I think you're all aware that any plant has tannins. It's just the level or the concentration of tannin that makes the wattle tree, the black wattle tree, useful in producing vegetable extracts. The industries in East Africa, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, and Kenya, developed or were established in the early 1950s, much later than the South African industry. And this was during a period of increased demand for extract, driven by a post-World War II boom in leather manufacture. This is South Africa, those you can't see, just to give you an idea of where the plantations grow. This is what's known as the mist belt in what is now known as KwaZulu-Natal. It grows, the tree grows best in the cool mist belt regions of southern and central Africa, and it likes to grow at altitudes of above 1,100 meters. So it doesn't grow well along the coast, and it will grow at high altitude, but there is an impact on the growth of the tree at very high altitudes, as I'll show you just now. This is Zimbabwe again. The plantations are here in the eastern districts of Zimbabwe, known as the Eastern Highlands. It's the mountainous area of the country, and again, all growing above 1,100 meters above sea level. It likes, doesn't like high temperatures, it doesn't like frost. It will grow at low altitudes and high altitudes. It will grow in the heat, but it doesn't grow very well. This is just Kenya. There used to be plantations in and around Eldoret. There's still remnants of the plantations there, and that is where, at the moment, the producer in Kenya is getting his raw material. Just as a matter of interest, Eldoret is on the equator, so the equator runs through there, and is at 7,000 feet above sea level. So it's quite high, and the trees there are generally shorter than the trees we see in South Africa and Zimbabwe because of the altitude. Just to give you an idea of the extent of the commercial plantations, South Africa has just over 130,000 hectares. I'm sorry, I'm metric, so I think you divide it by 2.54 or something to get acres. Zimbabwe has 12,000 hectares, Tanzania about 10,000 hectares, and Kenya at the moment relies on raw material from outgrowers. There are some government plantations, but because they were allowed to be cut on concession, people who had the concessions weren't replanting, so there's been a moratorium on the cutting of any kind of species in the Kenyan forest for some years now. Right, just to give you some information about how the tree is grown. These are the seedlings in a nursery. This is quite an old way of doing it. Basically, these are planting sleeves open at the top and the bottom. The seed generally comes from a seed orchard, so it's grown and produced, trying to find the best seed that has the best characteristics to give you the best tree. So the tree that's going to give you disease resistance, thick bark, small branching, etc., etc. And there's quite an extensive tree breeding program in most of the producing countries, either in-house or through the wattle industry, to produce what's called select seed and commercial seed, to give it a good, strong genetic base. The more modern way of growing your seedlings now is done under shade cloth in big growth tunnels on wire racks using polystyrene trays, and then using either an artificial growing medium, composted pine bark, which is when composted as inert, is used, and then you apply your minerals, your fertilizers through a microjet system. Just a shot, once the seedlings are ready, it takes about 6 to 7 months to get the seedlings out to a decent size where they will survive in the field. They're then planted out. The rows and the gap between the rows and in between the trees has been calculated scientifically to give the tree its best area to grow out, to get the best crop that you can and the best yields and the best use of that land. Most of your tending of the young plantations is done in the first 2 years. You do all your weedings, you do generally 2 thinnings, so you remove some of the trees to give space for the remaining trees to grow out, and in that you take out all the runts, you take out any damaged trees, diseased trees, etc., etc. This is just an overview. This is the plantations in eastern Zimbabwe, the factory down the bottom there, but you can see different size trees or age classes, as we call them, in compartments, and basically the whole thing is managed on a cycle, on an 8 to 10 year cycle. So you've always got raw material coming in. The ideal is to have, if you have 10,000 hectares, you've got 1,000 hectares of age 0, age 1, age 2. That never happens, because at some time something's going to come in here and create problems for you. It's just naturally happens. There is no such thing as a normal forest, which is a forest where you have equal age classes. It just doesn't happen. This is just another slide. This is in South Africa. Again, you can see the different ages of the trees. The trees are grown on a 10-year cycle, on a managed basis, as I've said already. And you need to note that it's on a sustainable basis and a renewable basis. So this is an ongoing cycle. Generally, the land where the trees are grown is not suitable for food crops. It's basically marginal sites where these trees and other tree species will grow quite well, commercial species. And certainly in South Africa, to plant trees, you have to have a planting permit, and that is determined by, is there another land use for that land before they would allow you to plant trees. Just also, many of the forests have a environmental certification called Forest Stewardship Council certification, so we conform to international standards when it comes to growing the trees. Obviously, during the life cycle of the tree, you've got to manage it. You don't just get it up to 2-3 years old and the canopy is closed, you clip the weeds out, and you leave it until it matures. You have to look after it, and there's certain things that you have to protect it from. One of them is fire. It can be devastating to commercial plantations. Fortunately, wattle has a tendency, because you saw on the previous slide, there's not a lot of litter below the canopy, so there's not a lot to burn, and generally tend to retard fires. I must confess, this is not wattle. This is a softwood, either a pine or a spruce or something, but it made a good picture. Again, fires can be devastating for the commercial forestry industry throughout the world. We hear of fires in Australia and California. This was some big fires in South Africa taken from the air in 2006. But other than fire, there are other things you have to protect your trees from. There's animals, fungal attacks, insects, etc., etc. This is just a shot of I don't know if anybody can guess what that is. Baboons. And that's just malicious damage, for use of a better word. I've actually seen in a young plantation a troop of baboons running through the plantation, cartwheeling, and then grabbing the seedlings to stop themselves, and in the process either breaking them or pulling them out of the ground. So they are very destructive, so we have to try and keep them out of the plantations. We don't believe there's any nutritional value in stripping the bark like that, or in the sap. And once that's happened, that tree is dead. It's no good to us. In the young seedlings, rabbits and buck will browse on the young seedlings, and they eat the growth point of the tree, and then you get the form is affected. You get another branch coming up to take over as a leader, and basically getting the bark off that is very, very difficult. Right, that's enough about the tree and the grain. Once it's ready for stripping, the bark is removed. These are two shots of manual stripping of the bark. The bark is then bundled. There is a move these days for various reasons, to mechanical harvesting. We have a mechanical harvester that will actually cut the tree, strip the bark off, cross-cut the tree, and then you use manual means to collect the bark, bundle it, and get it to the factory. I'm talking faster than mine. I can see there's an empty glass there and time is running on. This is semi-mechanical. This is using a chainsaw to fell the tree and cross-cut. The shot there of the bark being taken to the factory. It's weighed, obviously, so you have an idea of how much raw material is coming into your factory. Just two shots just to show that I've made a comment here, seen one, seen all. You can look at any of the factories in Africa and even in South America. They look very much the same, slightly different, but you can't really not recognize it if you've seen one before. And the technology is virtually the same technology that was put in place when these factories were built. This one is Zimbabwe and this is Kenya, and they were built in the 50s. Nothing much has changed since then. The technology is still the same. Right, now the actual manufacturing process, and I'll just run through this very quickly, then I've got some slides of some of the plant to give you an idea. Basically, you can see there, the bark is delivered to the factory. It's chopped up into little pieces. You're basically exposing the surfaces so that the extraction of the tannins is made easy. To put it in simple terms, making extract or extracting the extractives is basically a bit like making tea. It's a steam diffusion process. It's done in a sealed system using hot water and vacuums to draw off any surplus moisture. But basically, your chopped bark goes into your autoclaves. There's normally a battery of 6, and water is pumped under pressure, hot water, 121 degrees, through the battery and around again. That happens for about 6 hours, and basically what you're doing, like with a tea bag, except it's done in sealed units, and you take the tannins out. That results in what's called liquor, thin liquor. Still got quite a lot of moisture. I think it says, it doesn't say what the moisture is quite high. It's probably up around 60-70%. You then pass the thin liquor through evaporators, different types of multi-evaporators, falling pan system. Different factories use different evaporators, basically trying to take the moisture off. The thin liquor then becomes what we call thick liquor. Still got quite a high moisture content, so there's some further boiling later down the process to take that moisture out. You don't want to be selling moisture, you want to be selling tannins. So there's quite a process in extracting. You've got the extractives now, you want to get rid of the surplus moisture. From the thick liquor, you have two options. Certainly in the more advanced markets, the solid product we produce, you don't use anymore. It was used traditionally in the old pits, where the bags were just dropped over the pits and allowed to dissolve, and you had different concentration in the pits. We still do have a lot of solid used in India in drums, but they smash the solid and then feed that into the drums. But at this stage we split it, comes through into the reactors where chemicals are added if necessary. We do have bleach products where we bleach the readiness out of the extract to give a very light coloured extract, and ultimately a very light coloured leather in the end. That then goes through into a spray dryer. Basically, there's an atomizer here, spins at very high, spins your thick liquor at very high speed. You then induce heat through the cyclone. That then dries it out down to about 6.5% moisture, goes through the cyclones and down into the bagging, weighing, bagging, and packaging. You can also put it into these what we call finishers. Basically, it sits there and bubbles and boils for about another 6 hours. Again, you're boiling off the moisture, bringing it down to about 16 to 18%, and then you pour it into bags. The spent bark, which drops out of the bottom of the autoclaves, is then either dewatered. Not all factories have a dewatering plant. Basically, that's still very high in moisture, and it's then burnt in the boilers to try and get rid of it. It's a waste product. It's inert. It's not good for anything. We've tried it in the nurseries. We've tried to put it on the roads as a means to stabilize any soil breakdown or to stop mud, etc. It didn't work. It actually became worse. This is then just some quick shots of the raw material, the bundles of bark. The bark is bundled with the white face, the cambium side, inside to stop oxidization. And it's important that we do that and it's important that the product, the raw material, is processed as quickly as possible after felling. Otherwise it dries out, it oxidizes, and that impacts on the color of the ultimate extract that we sell into the market. This is just bundles going onto conveyor. The bundles are broken. Going through into the choppers. You'll see here there's a cyclone that it throws the chop bark up about 2.5, 3 stories. Comes out there either by mechanical means using conveyor belts or manual. It's then fed into the top of the autoclaves. Not a particularly good picture, but you can see the sacks and the top of the autoclaves are here. Those unwind, you open the top, and the extract falls in. About 6 tons of chopped bark, the bark drops in per autoclave. Again, this is a better shot of stainless steel autoclaves. One thing to note is that all the inner works of the factories are all non-ferrous. There's no iron. Obviously, iron and leather doesn't get on very well. And obviously, they try and keep the factories painted so that there's no rust or anything getting into the product. It's all sealed, and I say it's either brass or stainless steel inside the factories. I mentioned the finishers to make the solid. That's the finishers there. They're quite big. I think again there's about 6 meters of liquor in there per batch. You get about 130, 50 kg bags per finisher there. That's the extract, the solid extract being poured into the bags. It's a bit like treacle. It's quite hot. It dries and solidifies pretty quickly after you've poured it. There's the guy just bagging and weighing. This is just a picture of, in the back, you can't really see, I've got a couple of better pictures of the spray dryer where the powder is made. These are the cyclones for cooling. It's blown through to cool the powder down before you bag it. You're bagging it into as many of you might know, into a plastic inner, so if it's hot, it would just melt the plastic inner, so we have to cool it down, and that's what those cyclones do. That's another stainless steel finisher, slightly better picture. The atomizer sits at the top, spins it, I can't remember how fast, but it's incredibly fast, to get the liquor to form into a powder, and then it's dried with hot air. That's another spray dryer. It's a matter of interest, this is a well-traveled spray dryer. It used to be up in a factory in Eldoret. In 1999 it was dismantled, cut up into pieces, loaded in the back of 30-ton factories and transported down from Kenya into Tanzania, Zambia, and into eastern Zimbabwe. Put all back together, recommissioned, and produces fantastic powder. And the engineer was an old Scotsman, tremendous skills. It's just the bagging, just trying to compact them there. That's the product on pallets, just in storage, waiting to be sent either containerized or sent down to the port for containerization. That's just the schematics again. So I showed you pictures of the autoclaves coming through the spray dryer, without getting too technical, the finishes, the bagging. Pretty straightforward, very simple, appropriate technology. As I say, it hasn't changed since the 1950s and even earlier than that in South Africa. Some of the old steam pumps have been replaced obviously with electric pumps and liquid ring vacuum pumps, but the process has not changed in nearly 50 or more than 50 years now. Just some quick shots of product palletized. That's the solid there. We use sawdust between the bags and on the floor of the containers because it's hygroscopic. It's packed into a double jute bag. It actually breathes. So if you don't do that, going to India, this mostly goes to India, Pakistan, Iran, very hot there. It tends to stick together. This is just part of the product. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nigel, for that. Can I invite some questions from the audience or something? David?
Nigel, what percentage of bark do you get off the tree? And what happens to the tree once you finish that?
Sorry, I forgot to mention that. The tree is actually as valuable as the bark.
Right.
The tree, the wood is either turned into wood chips for paper, for fine paper. It's used for making mine props, charcoal, high-grade charcoal, got a very high calorific value. Most of the timber in South Africa goes into wood chips exported to Japan. Funnily enough, although it's fast growing in European terms, the 10-year cycle, it's considered a hardwood. So it has it's got a very short fiber length, so it's very good for fine paper, for bond paper, as opposed to your softwoods, which has a longer fiber length and is more suitable for tissue, newsprint, etc., etc. So the wood, everything in the tree virtually is utilized, other than the branches. But even the bigger branches, the bark on that does have tannin in it, and that is removed. Where certainly when hand stripping is done, as we call it, stripping of the bark, you take even from the bigger branches. With mechanical, it's a bit more difficult because you're relying on a harvesting head, normally on an excavator, on a wheeled, on a tracked excavator, and it has a limitation. But labor, it's very labor intensive, and labor is an issue, funny enough, in Africa. Productive labor, it's very hard work stripping the bark, and with the advent of AIDS and the pandemic in Africa, a lot of that productive age group, the sort of 20s to 40 age group, is not there anymore. And those that are there are much better educated, don't really want to work in a hard environment like forestry. So we've had to look at mechanical harvesting.
Excuse me, you know, on your manufacturing process, you've got chemicals in there. I missed that bit. What's that? Is there chemicals coming out or being added?
It's chemicals being added. We add a bit of, to some of our products, we add sodium bimetasulfite, which is a bleach.
Yeah.
We also add in all the powder products in South Africa, we put in a bit of EDTA as a matter of course. And we also add, it's a fish oil, I can't remember the name, as a dedusting agent to keep the dust down.
How long would it be after you've harvested that you would use the same land for replanting?
More or less straight away. So once you've got the bark off, comes off first, you take the timber off, you will then line out, you make a planting hole using the old stump line, ready for planting with the first rains. You need the rains, so it's about now they will be planting. In East Africa it's a little bit later, it's normally October, November, December the rains come. In South Africa it's a little bit earlier, the rains started last week, one of the factories started up last week. So no, it's kept on a rotation. I didn't mention, the sites, the better sites are fertilized. The acacia tree is a legume. It's nitrogen fixing, puts nitrogen back into the soil, and then you've got to put a bit of phosphate back in just to keep the phosphate levels at the right levels for the tree and for that site.
Ja, bevor jeg tog til lektor, One question is, we talked today about REACH, or we heard about REACH, and there's one big question concerning what is natural products. And I know about the discussions in Germany, I just played for such. Is a vegetable tanning agent, can it be considered such a natural product? In this case, it would be outside of REACH. The question, have you got an opinion or already?
We do. Cleverly, my principals in Africa have decided to make Forestal and myself the only representative. We tried to get our base product, which is a completely natural product. There's no additives other than a little bit of EDTA and some fish oil for the dedusting. But the percentages in the ordinary powder are so minuscule. We tried to get it onto NH6, I think it was, and we were turned down by the European Chemicals Agency. So we have to go through. We have already pre-registered our products. It's not considered natural. We thought we would.
But the reason is the treatment in a certain way. I mean,
No, it's because we already have an INEX and a CAS number for it, and they consider it because you're extracting it and concentrating it. If you sold raw bark into the tanneries, then yes, it's a natural product. But the fact that you're putting it through a process and extracting it and concentrating the tannins, it does. That's my understanding of it, how it's been explained to me.
I heard a different one, which is came from the German Chemical Industry Federation and also the lawyers. They say it may be extracted, no problem, but just by water. Water can be heated, but don't get any chemical. So this was the question.
That's exactly what we do.
We add something.
To some products we add, but to the bulk of what we sell, our biggest product is the ordinary powder, completely natural, untreated. When I say untreated, there's a little bit of EDTA in there. But if you do it, the bleached is different. It's a bisulfited product. It has, but even the remnants of the bisulfite in the product that the tanners buy is very, very small. It's less than, apart from one product, it's less than 10%. But the information we have is we have to register. So we've pre-registered to make sure that if they decide down the line that it's a natural product, we don't have to go through full registration. Well, that'll be great, but we don't want to miss out.
Actually, I think it's
Leather, the odour is attributed to the vegetable tanning extract. Do you also market leather odour?
No.
please.
What's the potential environmental impact caused by harvesting the trees, and how do you go about it?
Sorry, just say that again.
What's the potential environmental impact caused by harvesting the trees, and how do you take care of that?
Well, there are a number of issues because, as I said, you know, a lot of the commercial plantations are grown in hilly areas for one, because those sites are not suitable for food crops or any other commercial crop. And in things like when you're weeding, obviously you don't want to, you remove the weeds and you leave the weeds in the rows between the trees. Obviously you don't want to line that down the slope, because that automatically forms a natural furrow for rain. When it rains, it'll come up against the brush, the weeds, and run straight down the slope, creating gullies. So all the weedings are put across the slope. Secondly, in the old days, 10, 15 years ago, the tree generates a lot of branches, so, and they're not used for anything. There are projects being looked at the moment to use that to produce energy, but there aren't any commercial plants available at the moment. So the brushwood, as we call it, used to be burnt, which obviously is not environmentally friendly. You're putting masses of carbon dioxide into the air. These days, the brushwood is just laid in what we call windrows, and you interplant the new trees in amongst it. And that eventually, over 10 years, not even 10 years, after about 3 years, that brushwood it naturally breaks down and just forms a natural compost. If you go into a forest and dig, you'll see there's a humus layer, very thick, especially after 2 or 3 rotations. Obviously, in the whole planning of the forest, its road system, you've got to look at the slopes in terms of where you put your roads. You've got to have good drainage on your roads. So, you know, forestry is a science. It's not an art and it's not a craft. I don't know if that's answered your question.
Partly, I suppose when you harvest the trees, you leave open land.
Oh yes. We don't plant up to the streamlines, the river lines. You leave. I think it's the accepted norm in commercial forestry in Africa is something like 21 meters from a dry riverbed and 30 meters from a flowing river or stream. So you have these riparian zones. You have, again, within your forest certification, if you have owls and raptors, you actually have to put perches in your felled area. So you put bits of stems of the trees, and you nail a T on the top, so that the raptors can sit there and look for rodents and things in the plantation. If you know of any historical or cultural sites, those are protected. If there are any endangered species, those are protected. You don't grow trees in those areas. So there's a complete environmental management system within the commercial plantations. Say wetland areas we're not allowed to plant in. It is very specific.
Does your company control all of that, including the seedlings and the growth, and presumably you sell the trees on, although you take the extract from the bark?
It varies depending on the country. In Kenya, there's a commercial producer, owns a factory only, has a little bit of plantations, generally buys in his raw material from either the Kenyan government forests or from smallholders who have trees. In Zimbabwe, the business there, the company owns the land, owns the trees. They control the resource from seeding right the way through. In South Africa, the industry is made up of 4,000 growers who have not just wattle, they grow sugarcane, they might also grow eucalyptus and pines, and they ultimately own the factories. They used to be cooperatives, they're now companies because the laws in South Africa have changed. So ultimately the growers own the factories, and ultimately, and they control hopefully the raw material, the quality of it, how quick it gets into the factories.
That's very interesting.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Nigel, for that. We'll help